Hello, everyone, and welcome to CSM Mastermind. My name is Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We are back for our monthly live webcast today discussing how to effectively manage organizational change as a CSM. This free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training with close to 5,000 graduates across nearly 70 countries. Our popular virtual instructor-led boot camps run monthly. We offer 12-week coaching programs 3 times a year with our spring cohort starting this week. And late registration, by the way, is available through Friday. And we have a number of standalone courses, all taught by industry experts. Upcoming in the first half of 2021, we're rolling out level 5 of our CCSM curriculum, along with a number of new virtual instructor-led programs, including Having Difficult Conversations, and 2 courses being taught by a couple of our panelists today. Change Management for Customer Success with Toby Lucich, and What Great Managers Do with Patrick James. You can find out more about our training programs at successcoaching.co. Now, for those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. This right now, especially for people who've been to this before, is the only script that I follow during the entire webinar. Regardless of the company you work for, the details of your customer-facing role, or the size of the customers you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. We also encourage you to suggest topics and guests for our program. So reach out and connect with me on LinkedIn and drop me a note. The schedule for our upcoming events can be found at successcoaching.co, which I believe Ashley has placed in the chat. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and click on the events link to check out what's coming up. As usual, we'll post a replay of this webinar along with a transcription early next week on our website. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. The Mastermind series allows us to focus on the practical and give you real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those out in the wild that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. To do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspective. Now, we will be taking questions later during the webcast, so please use that Q&A functionality found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are, what they do, and what they're either reading or streaming right now. Let's get started with Emmanuel. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Andrew, for that introduction. As a way of introducing myself to the group, I'm currently the global head of customer success at Calypso Technology, a leading provider of cloud-enabled capital markets and investment management software. Right? I lead a team of customer success and customer success operations members dotted across the world. And to answer your question or your ask, Andrew, what am I reading right now? I'm reading a book written by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference.
Great book. Love that book. One of my favorites.
Yes.
Wonderful. Thanks, Emmanuel.
Yeah.
Patrick, you're up.
Hello, I'm Patrick James, and just a little background about me. I was a management consultant at Deloitte for 11 years, doing large system implementations and digital transformations. I've been an executive and leader at startups to Fortune 500 companies, working with professional services, customer success. I was a chief operating officer. Currently, I'm an instructor at San Francisco State University, teaching management information systems for their MBA program, as well as I'm the president of Inroad, doing training consulting where we focus on managers in the organization And so, as Andrew had mentioned previously, we're very excited. We're teaming up with Success Hacker and delivering a course called What Great Managers Do, focused on customer success. And so we do consulting as well, managing digital transformations, program management offices, implementation services, and onboarding, and then as well as all kinds of training targeted for managers, project managers, change management. And I'm also a certified ProSci change management practitioners. And what I'm reading right now is I'm taking a little bit of a different twist. I'm reading Seth Godin's It's About Marketing. So kind of expanding horizon into the marketing field and curiosity there.
That's another great read. I've read that as well. I actually got my degree in marketing.
Really?
Never held a marketing job. although that's what we do actually. And there is a component of that in post sales and customer success. So yeah. I love the stuff that Seth Godin writes. So excellent. Thanks, Patrick. And last but not least, Toby.
Thanks, Andrew. Yeah, this is Toby Lusich with Return Leverage. I've been partnering with Success Hackers now over the last couple of years to put together a couple courses, and excited to be part of this panel today. Our work at Return Leverage is really focused on helping clients navigate big transitions. These are sometimes human in nature, sometimes technology based, but at the end of the day, it's how do we bring people with us effectively? And so, like Patrick, I look to some of the more familiar models, and ProSci is pretty common here in the US. What I found is, like anything, once we get into it a little bit and start to play with the different tools, we start to mix it up, and that's what I love most. Right now I'm reading, in the world of mixing it up, there's so much fascinating research and literature coming out of the behavioral economics and psych space. And so I just recently downloaded Adam Grant's new book called Rethink. And it's a really interesting read or listen. So as the weather gets better, it's a good thing to drag with me for afternoon walks.
Nice. Yeah. Love that.
Intriguing.
I'll have to check that out. I'm in between books right now, so I just and I'm hoping to start my next one within the next week, but I just binged The Queen's Gambit, and I never thought that I would say, wow, chess is fascinating. I mean, for chess players, I respect that, but I never thought that you could develop a movie or a TV series around chess. It was very well done. I was really impressed with the script and the acting. So if you haven't seen The Queen's Gambit, I know I'm probably slow on that. I know a lot of people have already seen it, but I was thoroughly entertained, and I binged it Thursday through Sunday. So excellent. Once again, thank you to everyone. I and everyone else that is here today. Thank you three for spending time with us, and Emmanuel especially. I know that Toby and Patrick are West Coast folks, but you're out there in the UK, so it's a late night for you. So I appreciate you spending some time with us.
It's a pleasure.
So let's get to the topic at hand. I have been, and for those of you who follow me and have heard me speak on this over the last few years, I've been waxing poetic about how important change management is in the world of customer success, especially for the subscription economy, both externally with customers as we try to get them to create a new habit that incorporates our solution, but also internally to help drive the changes that will help our own organizations better meet the needs and the value-based outcomes that our customers seek. Right? It's not just about we want to lead with it being about the customer, but we need to be able to handle change management internally as well. Now, we'll be getting deeper into the weeds about how to apply a change management mindset or framework to driving customer adoption in next month's Customer Success Leadership Roundtable, which Toby actually will be participating in as well. But for now, I want to focus on the concept of change management in general. Okay, so let's take a step back to start and make sure we're all on the same page. What is change management? What does it entail? And why is it so darn important?
Yeah, maybe I'll jump in and get started. I think in the simplest of terms, when I think about change management, it's really it's really going from where we're at today to where we aspire to be. And oftentimes we lose sight of the personal journey that takes place, right? There's always a reluctance to letting go. But even while we think about it as a group and how we move together from where we are to where we want to be, there's also some grieving that we need to go through. So change management in my mind is both very personal, and then it's also something that we have to activate in a more tribal or holistic way so that we all get to the destination together.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I look at change management. It's not a one-time thing that you do. It's not just an email or a conversation or an all hands meeting and then, we've done change management. It's, I think the better way to look at it and get into the mindset is that it's a journey that you're going to go on, and you're going to go from a current state through transition to a future state. And it's that journey. And there's a saying that we use in change management is that, it's not organization, organizations don't change. It's the people that do. Yeah. And you've got to take them along that journey.
Yeah. And I think, what you said is exactly spot on, right? It has to start with the individual, right? Any change, right? Even for the person who's actually delivering the change, it starts by them first changing, right? That journey starts with that individual, and then take it forward from that point. We all have that deep-rooted desire, right, of wanting to be in control of what is happening around us, right? And then change, for that reason, creates a reaction, right? That reaction might be, yay, wow, let's go ahead, or it may be, let me wait and see, or it may be, no ways, right? It kind of reminds me of my own, story, 15 years ago, right? When I was doing a big transformational change at one of Africa's leading banks, right? Typical scenario, right? A big bank acquires small banks, and you have to replace all the system, and suddenly you have a huge transformational program that is taking place. Everybody knew when that was taking place that the system that those banks that were acquired had were 30-year-old systems, right? That it wasn't efficient anymore. But the manner in which it was done created a reaction, right? And that reaction was because people felt they lost control, right? I had tellers. Can you imagine? I had tellers refusing the change because they were saying, look, I can serve my customer in a second. Now you want me to learn new keys, new ways of doing things, not really looking at what it was bringing in terms of, change for them, because believe it or not, whilst they were fast in serving customers, they were spending most of them their evenings reconciling what they had done throughout the day, right? And they would get home late, and only until they realized that actually by moving to this new system, they would then be able to get home early. That's when the coin dropped, kind of thing. So that's kind of talks about the change management, right? You have to bring in the people. The change has to happen at the individual level, right?
Well, and you bring up a really good point. And I know that one of the tools, as in the toolkit for change management, is the what's in it for me concept, yes. Right? And we need to start with the what's in it for me, because this is a personal thing. It's a human thing, right? And you can't, and I've seen companies make the mistake of, well, this is why we're doing it for the company. Okay, that's great. I understand that, but you're not communicating, and you need to lead people to this. You need to spell it out for them. This is what's in it for you.
Yeah.
With them, as you like to put it, Toby.
Yeah, it's a really interesting piece, right? None of us want to change just for grins.
Mm.
It's not easy. It activates this grieving cycle, right? The letting go. And
that's important, the letting go piece, because if we don't manage it effectively, people default back to what they're used to.
Yeah.
Right.
There was this really interesting study. Like I said, a lot of geeky, like psych stuff, but it was a study talking about habits and behaviors. Yeah. And they surveyed a population, they tracked them through this, and it was good for them. It was about health changes. But on average, they found it took 66 intentional acts on average for that to become a new behavior. And the most successful, it was 18 intentional acts. And so this idea of like, what's in it for me? If I don't care enough, then I'm sure not going to stick it out for 18. And if I'm part of the general pack, I'm going to forget about it long before we get to 66. And so we need to be passionate. We need some urgency around it as well.
Yeah, I think that when you start talking about habits, that's where you get into really having to understand each person's individual situation, what motivates them. And that's where, where you're talking about the behavioral side, you really have to drill down. And some of those peanut butter approaches, and I get that sometimes the transformations are very, very large that we work with, but you still have to look at how is the individual, or you can maybe go up a little bit higher, go to the department. How are they going along during that journey, that transformation? Because everyone is going to accept the change or embrace the change at a different pace.
Yeah.
So you have to really kind of say, oh, well, this group or this person is much further behind because we haven't really rolled out specific communication to really help them understand what's in it for them, or what's in it for me, or what's in it for us.
Yeah.
So you've got to really figure out and tailor that communication at that point in time for that group or that individual to address that motivation factor.
Yeah, and going back to what I said earlier on, which goes along with what you've just said, Patrick, I think, whenever I'm looking at change, right, I categorize the people in those three buckets, right? The people that you have, and I think it's the same with technology, right? You have the people that will be embracing the change. They are the first one to go. You have the people that are wait and see, and then you have the people that are the naysayer or the doubting Thomas, as I will call them. But for all those people, you still have the influencing factors that I will call, right? And it depends on the degree of where everyone is in terms of that bucket, right? You have things around the personal, the person's view of the current state, right? This is what we talked about earlier on, about the tailor saying, "This, look, I'm used of these keys for 30 years, and now you want me to change my way of operating. That's painful for me. I don't want to go through that," right? And then how they perceive the problem, okay, we were told, you guys, you've bought us, and therefore we need to replace the system. Okay, why? Getting that out there, and also what's very important, and sometimes what we often miss, is also the credibility of the person who's actually doing the change, right? How many changes have they done, and how has it been perceived in terms of successfully implementing those change? If it's a guy or a lady who's done change and dropped and moved on, and people don't perceive that as a person who can actually deliver it, you won't have their buy-in. And of course, as part of that as well, in any change, you have to always watch out for misinformation, right? Whether there is a circulation of information that is not right, and finding ways to address those and restore the correctness of the change that is taking place. So those are kind of the things that I watch out, and it's in all the three aspects, right? It's just like anything. You want to make sure that even your promoters, you continue to watch them so that they continue to see the benefit of the change. They continue to see how that is going to bring them forward, and they continue to see what's in it for them, right? and therefore make it easier and like a snowball effect. They will then drag other people and so on. But it starts with the individual, and we need to be aware of those influencing factors as well.
Yeah, it's not easy. It's complicated, right? You need to have a plan. You need to have a strategy. You can't go into trying to drive change inside your organization or in your customer's organization without a plan. So exactly. How do you go about starting to set the stage for change?
Yeah, the Emmanuel's example a few minutes ago about the tellers not seeing the value, and I want to connect that dot to this idea of what's been our track record of change. And I think that even before we embark on it as a CSM, the sale has taken place, but all these expectations stand in front of you on day one, right? The stage has already been set. And so I think a lot about how do we start to attach what's coming to where an organization is. And a lot of that conversation is acknowledging both the good and the bad. I think about like a bow and arrow. And the more we bring to light the need for change, where the gaps are and why the solution that you're offering is so important, the more clearly people understand it, then the more painful it becomes, right? So like if the tellers don't appreciate that they could go home at a reasonable hour, there's no sense in the suffering. And so I think about how we pull back that bowstring slowly and build up that energy and that tension. And as we start to name it, people get emotionally engaged because now they're getting kind of wound up about the frustrations that they live with and they forgot. And they can't even imagine. So as we build that energy, we can also start to name past experiences where they have been successful, big or little, but we can start to create that energy and then also help them see it through their own cultural lens. And I think that's a big piece of it. What succeeded with the banking group in Africa may not play with an identical banking organization in a different culture, or even another business in that same culture, right? There's a different rhythm that every organization has, and we need to help them tell us how to help them.
Right. Yeah. You touched on culture. So it could be a business that has a different internal culture, right? So there's a need to analyze that culture. Are they going to support change? And I think that's whether we're trying to drive change with our customers and create a new habit, but just as important, how do we as CSMs inside our own company drive change as in an effective way as possible? Maybe I don't have a huge formal change management program. What are some of the tools maybe that I can use to be able to present the thing that our internal organizations need to hear so that we can better serve our customers? Any ideas on that? Patrick? Emmanuel?
Well, I look at when looking at how did you work with sales? How was the sales process, and what was promised, and what are we going to deliver? And looking at internally how we have structured our agreements with the customers. I'm sorry, are you getting feedback?
No.
I can't hear you. Sorry.
Can't hear me?
Yeah, Patrick, I can hear that little bit of feedback as well.
Yeah. I'm not getting any feedback.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe I'll pick it up from there, right?
Yeah.
And that aspect of the internal, the change, the cultural, and how all those elements play in that aspect. And especially from a CSM perspective, right? We are constantly in the middle of change, right? It could be a change that's happening with a customer, a change that is being looked at from the internal organization in terms of new policies and so on, that we want to make sure that the customers are aware of that. All that is a process that needs to take place first internally and then eventually find its way to the customer. And as customer success managers, we are spending our days to manage those, right? We're spending time with customers to understand their dynamics, to tailor the message so that it is that change that we are trying to do in terms of behavior, or maybe even changing the direction of travel of a particular customer, or churn prevention, or whatever it may be. It's still a process that we are taking the customer from one point to the next. That involves talking to and bringing people together to see the common benefits, especially when I'm looking at what's happening with my own organization. We do have customers that have had issues with how we dealt with their issues in the past, for example, right? And since a few years ago, we've gone through a transformation process where we've changed our way of dealing with the support issues. We've introduced the customer success, and to take the customer from that perceived initial view of what they had of us and where we want them to think of us. It's a journey, like what Patrick referred to in the beginning, and that journey consists of multiple steps, which will be repetitive, right? Because this is the nature of change. You have to continue to reinforce the message. And one of the things that when we talk about the tools that we can put in place, even if we don't have you're a small organization, there's one particular methodology that again I was introduced with 15 years ago, which is ADKAR, right? And it's one that I've kept. Try to keep. Yes, I know there are multiple ways of doing, but it's very simple in the way it does things. And I think Patrick is probably an expert on that. And it's all about creating awareness, creating the desire, the knowledge around the change that is taking place, ability, creating the ability, making people able to do that change, and then reinforcement. That is the piece that so often we don't look at. But even with customers, as customer success, when we are putting changes out there, we may have done all that part of creating the awareness, the desire, and so on. But very often, we seem to be lacking in the reinforcement part. And as a result, like anything, people return to old habits, right? And this is the kind of thing that I constantly tell even my customer success managers right now, is that yes, you may sound repetitive. Yes, you may feel sometimes that like you're a parrot, right? That you're saying the same thing or addressing the same issue, but that's part of the reinforcement. And eventually these guys, that are going through that change will see the benefit. They will see the light. It will be that aha moment, right? That's what I call it.
Yeah, you're trying to create a habit, and that repetition is important in creating the habit. Toby, I think I'm familiar with the study you cited. I think it was from London University, and it was that study that said, they recorded a group of 1,000 people over a year and said, we want you to pick a habit that you want to create or a habit that you want to break, and record it in a journal. And at the low end, it was like 20 something. It took 20 times to 20 repetitions to create that habit or shake that habit. At the high end, it was like 200 and some odd, 280 times. But right in the middle it was 66. That's what I remember the study, and I found that fascinating because back in the 50s, somebody said, to create a habit, it takes 30 days. And it was this, if I remember the story correctly, it was a cosmetic surgeon in Southern California just came up with this, it takes 30 days to create a habit. And then all of the gyms, all the gyms kind of jumped on that and said, oh yeah, you can create a habit. Just join us for, a 30-day trial. And that's how they suck you in. It's only going to take you 30 days to get your exercise routine going, and it's a crock. It's not accurate. It took me, for me to get into my exercise routine, and I've spoken about this before, it took me a good 2.5, 3 months to get my body and my mind in this, in this thought process. Oh, I got to get up every morning and go work out.
Yeah. And for when I look at, for example, I've been in the fintech world for a while now, right? When I look at change, right, any sort of change, be it change in policy, be it change in whatever it may be, right, that we are making, in my experience, it takes about 18 months, right, for people to bode in. And this is the world that I live in, at least my experience so far. Why am I saying 18 months? Because during that 18 months, when you are doing that change and repeating and talking, you still have that journey to take through, and people still are referring or used to the old ways of doing things. Right. And generally, what I've seen is that it takes roughly that, right? And during that time, if you just let go of that reinforcement period of just repeating what is happening, the change that is taking place, and highlighting what's in it for them, because I think that's the important part as well, highlighting the end goal, right? The journey might be painful right now, it might be difficult because of new muscle memory, and all this thing that people use as terms. But once that we pass that aha moment, you still have that period of readjustment, like what you were saying, right? Getting yourself accustomed to, okay, this is the way things are going to happen. Okay, let's do it, right? Yeah. And generally, that's about that time that I've noted, at least when I'm effecting change in my structure or in the work the world that I live in. Yeah.
Yeah, Patrick, you got your audio fix there?
I do. Yeah. I want to come back to the question you had asked, and I apologize for my feedback, the loud noise that I was getting.
We weren't hearing it, but okay.
Anyways, hey, so when I look at what we can do is, as a customer success practitioner internally, one of the things that I look at where sometimes we have bumps in the roads and you're kind of looking for those data points to kind of like, where can we make change and fix things is, after action reviews. Some people call them postmortems, and I know that most of us on this call do not like that term at all. Yeah. But that is
like associating death with
exactly, no kidding. So after action reviews, rich with information, and so looking at those and internally and kind of saying, well, okay, where are we having kind of those bumps in the road? Where do we need to make transitions? And really formulating a story or creating a vision, because one of the big things about change management is creating that vision for change. Why do we need to change? And so then, of course, you can start getting all kinds of data points. But as you go and work on creating change internally, a lot of times people talk about, or they create talking points. And one of the things that I believe in the customer service world is that you have to develop listening points, so that when, this comes out of, working with sales. I worked with sales quite a bit, is, they're dealing with customers, and sometimes the conversations are very conceptual in nature, very high level. And it's got to be of, when I hear this, it means that. And so wherever you're looking at your change journey, so if let's say a customer says, oh, during the sales cycle that, wow, we have this and this and this, and you're like, wow, that's a pretty complex implementation, or that's a pretty complex configuration. That's a listening point that means that, oh, well, we've got to set these expectations here. Well, the same applies during your change management journey, is to develop those listening points so that when you do have those conversations, you're not just kind of dealing with things on the fly. You've already anticipated, and a lot of that comes, again, back out of those after action reviews. It's rich of data, as well as situations that you can address during your change journey.
Yeah, I love that. I think what it makes me think about too, in the spirit of some of those tools, oftentimes we think about the mechanisms that we have that we can build new ceremony around, whether it's introducing the after action or formalizing our kickoffs and, well-structured experiences there. But there's a whole myriad of things. Like, we're living in living, breathing, changing organisms that we just happen to call businesses. And customers are as well. And so, it's a little bit meta, but whatever we focus on today, right, it means that we're ignoring six dozen other things that are also changing. And so when we think about tools of change, sometimes it's being that effective mouthpiece for the customer. Is the CSM talk with the customer? There's folks creating features and functions that aren't hearing how that resonates. And I feel like that's a super powerful tool for change. I also think that rewards models are powerful up to a point. A lot of research says intrinsic motivation is the only way that we make it last. Yeah. But all of us find a way to spend an extra buck, when we get that thank you acknowledgement. So there's a lot of other tools too that I would encourage folks to think about that might just feel like normal part of your operational landscape. But that input that you're gathering from your customers, good and bad, sometimes the negative feedback is more powerful than the positive. It helps us continue to adapt and evolve our offering. So that's one good way to change.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well, right? Sometimes we get too stuck up in the change and we actually forget that, again, going back to the fact that change is an individual journey, right? Before it becomes a group journey. And we often forget the fact that successes have to also be celebrated, right? And this is an important aspect of change as well, right? Because depending on the change that you are doing, right? In the world that I live, some of our customers are doing changes that will take them 5 years, right? Some of them, more than that, right? And that can be a tough journey, right? Filled with fatigue, filled with people saying, when is it going to be done, right? And throughout that journey, as a change person, you need to be thinking around, how do I make this journey such that at certain points, when those points happen, we celebrate the successes, we ensure that at the same time, individual but also group successes are celebrated, but also establish those points where you are quickly also validating that what you are trying to achieve, I call them audit points, that what you're trying to achieve, you are actually on course. Because whenever you're doing these changes that are spanning long periods, and it could be even a change that is not, for a shorter period, but you want to be able to look back and say, okay, we've moved from this step to that step, right? And this is the only way you can do that. So in terms of tooling, right, Andrew, going back to your question, that's one aspect as well that I find very effective. Whenever I'm devising a change, I make sure that it first looks at the individual. I understand the concept around that, and then also put points around the journey where I can audit, but also celebrate with when we have made progress, and course correct where we have not, right? So it's very important to have that as part of your change management process, right?
And I think that part of that too is this idea of change doesn't have to be, world altering. And the better a job we do of shrinking it into small pieces, it lets us unlock a lot of energy. We build some momentum and success, whether it's working out or eating healthy. When we make some of these changes small, we build a lot more buy-in. A lot of these pieces that we're touching on, some of these themes, John Cotter did a really great job. He's a Harvard Business Emeritus professor. Did a great job though pulling these together, and we talk about them in the course. But yeah, let's create reasons to celebrate, both within our own teams and organizations, but also for our customers.
For sure.
Yeah, actually, I was just going to mention Cotter. I mean, just fantastic work about, creating a sense of urgency, quick wins, and so that you get that upward spiral of positivity or just energy during the change effort. So Cotter's work, Leading Change, is just a fantastic book.
I'll drop the 95 article into the chat because it was brilliant.
Yeah, that'd be great. And while you're doing that, why don't we take some questions? Remember, folks, Q&A buttons at the bottom. You can either upvote a question that's already in the list, or you can add your own. And it looks like Toby actually has volunteered to jump in on the first question from B. B, thank you for being here today and asking the question. Managing change effectively is so dependent on the organization's culture. Would love to hear your take on how to take culture into consideration when you're working on transformation strategies or change management strategies.
Yeah, no, that's a great question, and it goes back to I saw that pop up, and it made me. That's why I brought up the bow analogy. I think too often organizations see the change as moving away from what they value and what's made them successful. And coming into a new client, or even as a new employee in an organization, we don't always know where those seismic events and experiences have been that have really shaped and defined that organization and how they move in the world. And so as a change agent, either within your organization or helping clients, part of that job is really starting to uncover those cultural pillars, those experiences and their values, right? So to the extent that we can help a client name those values and what makes their culture unique and important, then we can be really intentional about linking the ongoing health and success of those valuable things to the future. So the same way that with them is tellers getting to go home at a reasonable hour, it's also how we preserve their DNA and help them see the DNA of their organization grow through time.
Yeah, that's great. So what's in it for me? What's in it for the organization as well, right? And helping paint that picture. Patrick, Emmanuel, you guys have anything to add to that?
No, I think Toby has said it all, right?
Yeah.
Excellent. Toby, can you do me a favor? Hit the answer live button and then the button that says that question has been answered.
I'm happy to.
Cool. Thank you, B, for the question and for being here today. Haley asks, and Emmanuel's jumped in to kick this answer off. What have you seen to be an effective way of communicating what change is taking place to the entire organization and how the change to impact different levels within the organization so it's well received and accepted? Yeah.
Thanks for that, Haley. A very, very poignant question, right? In anything that I've done in terms of changes, I've always tried to identify who are the main players, right? Because it's important to identify those characters that I call influencers, right? It's important before devising any sort of communication or awareness program about the change, that you get the buy-in of those individuals that really have the influence on the rest, right? It's an important aspect of managing the change and making sure that you get those early adopters. And that's one technique that I've often used, right? Whenever I'm trying to put a change in place, right, I make sure that the people that I know could be stumbling block to the change, I get them involved early, right? I get them involved early and I make them part of that change for them to feel that they have contributed to that change. And then the rest becomes then them, pushing that message down to their teams. And then by the time you get to actually publicizing or making it, an organization-wide, communication, the key people have already had a view on that. You've given them the time to grieve, because as using Toby's word, change is happening. So there's a bit of grievance right there. But then afterwards, they realize, okay, this is actually taking me from point A to point B. And therefore, you already have a base from which to work on. So for me to answer your question is always start early with those influential individuals that will be part of your change journey, because then you can use them as your elements to reinforce the change.
Yeah, I've successfully used that strategy for years. Let's find the people who are going to have the biggest influence over others, and those could be peers, those could be managers, right? But let's find, and let's over index on training them, on getting them to buy in, right? And this, I mean, that has been probably one of the most impactful strategies that I've used in my 20 years of digital transformation and implementation of new systems and processes, is finding those people, not just in, and we're not just talking about customer. That's not just finding those. That's definitely a role that all of you play in customer success. Once again, we'll get into that next month in the CSLR. But internally, finding those people within the peers within your organization and within other teams in your organization, finding out who those people are and getting them on your side.
Yeah. And that's very important, and sometimes a part that we often overlook, right? Going back to the example that I mentioned earlier on in my experience with this bank that had been acquired, right? When I joined into that transformational project, I basically got thrown into that location, right? They had no knowledge of me as an individual, no knowledge of what I had done in the past. So here was this guy who had come in to implement a change, right? And that in itself was, it was good for me. It was a good experience, but it was a wrong approach, right? And it had to be a realization on my side. And thanks to this friend of mine who introduced me to ADCAR at the time, that I had to get to know the people, get to understand who were the influencers, and instead of continuing with the change like a bulldozer, just going and said, we're going to do it no matter what, we had to take a step back, right? And say, okay, the change is going to happen anyway, but let's make sure that the people that are important to get on board, we get them on board. And that was the start of me spending a lot of time explaining to the head tailor to say, look, by the way, what time do you get home? Usually I get home about 10 o'clock. Okay. Do you realize that if we do this, you're going to be getting home at 5 o'clock? What? Yes, I'm telling you, you're going to be at home at 5 o'clock. I explained to them, and guess what? Those are the people, when they realized that, they were publicizing it to their teams. And of course, they held me accountable to that, because when we went live, they were like, let's see if we're going to get home at 5 o'clock. So there was a buzz and an excitement to see, okay, we have put this system live. Let's see if we're going to go home at 5 o'clock. Okay, they didn't go home at 5 o'clock, but it was not 10 o'clock, right? They went home earlier. And for them, it was a beginning of then realization that, okay, actually this change is good for us. Let's go to the journey. And guess what? I was supposed to be there for 6 months. I ended up being there for 4 years, implementing that transformational change, right? And that's part of one of the things that we need to make sure that we take care of when we are implementing those changes. Make sure you take care of those influential pieces or factors or people within the organization.
Yeah, it takes time. There's work involved. You don't teach somebody to swim by pushing them in the deep end of the pool. All you do is you piss them off, right? It's not an effective strategy.
Right. So, I'm here to change you, right?
Yeah, I'm here to change you. Learn how to swim.
Yes, please.
Right? That's not the way to do it. Excellent, Haley. Thank you for the question. The next question, which Patrick has volunteered to start answering, is from Russell Bourne. Russell, thanks for joining us. Can you compare and contrast how you as leaders approach change management internally? For example, embracing new goals or programs in your company versus externally. For example, helping a new customer contact adopt your software instead of bringing in what they're used to using.
And one of the things that I look at, let me maybe break it down into what are some kind of similarities that approaches that I look at as a leader, and then just kind of things that may be different for an external entity or organization where we're implementing a solution or service. For me, and not just for me, it's a lot of the change management organizations all point to who's the sponsor, who's driving and championing this change. And so whether it's within my own organization or a customer where we're working, who is sponsoring the change, and how are they respected within the organization? How are they, what's their ability to communicate, the frequency at which they communicate, and then of course also where are they going to get resistance? So spending a lot of time with customers and the sponsors and really kind of getting an understanding versus internally, the sponsors I know well. If I'm an employee within the organization, I've got a pulse on that, especially because there's a series of questions you can that each of us on this call have worked with throughout our career, where you can really dive down and help those sponsors be effective in their communication. Also, I look at change fatigue with customers.
Change fatigue. Is that what you said? Yes.
Change fatigue. So if I'm, in my own organization, I can kind of look across the landscape because I've been there, I've got the history, I know. But when I'm with a customer, I'm really looking at, wow, is this their, fourth system to implement or process, significant process change within the last 6 months? You've got to be looking at that. Also, I look at, what's their awareness of why they're changing for a customer, and what's their desire. I've worked with customers who have been on implementations for over a year and a half, and they've been working on it and everything like that. And you would think that after working on it for a year and a half, their desire is high, desire to get live. But because they weren't embracing the ability to change their processes or to think differently about how they do their business, it was desire to actually that was preventing them from going forward. And if you're familiar with the ADKAR model of A being awareness, D being desire, K being the knowledge to change, ability is the next, and then of course reinforcement, which Emmanuel has talked about quite extensively. And so you have to reinforce that change. But if you look at it, a year and a half, they've been working on this, and there was really no desire. It was like, oh, well, you vendor or whatever, you guys go ahead and do it. I looked at it and said, I got to create the desire. And so I created a story, a vision of what would happen if they didn't change. And all of a sudden, boom, that lit the fire under them because it was a significant impact, and that created the desire. The last thing I would look at in both organizations is really the managers. Managers are the lifeblood of the organization. People are going to listen to what their direct reports say. Now, they may not like it, but that's where they're going to, when it comes down to personal change, studies have shown from both Gallup as well as ProSci that individuals be most likely to act on, and I think it was something like 72% would be willing to act on what their manager said versus any other person inside the organization on a personal change. Now, business is different. Business changes comes from CEO or your executive managers, and that's different. But on a personal change, it needs to come from managers, and so that's why we work with managers quite extensively.
I think that Patrick touches too on that notion of who are the formal organizational title holders, who are the influencers, who are those people that have enough political capital. We show up from the outside or as a new leader brought in to whatever organization. Maybe you're a new leader chartered to set up customer success in a new way and get ready to scale. You don't have any political capital, right? Yeah. What you do have is everybody's pre-existing opinions. You have all their history, and all that gets placed right at your feet. So whether it's internally as a leader driving change or, as this change agent coming into a client, there's a lot of things that weren't your making that are yours to sort out. And so understanding where that network of energy and reputation exists, and starting to tap into that is so vital. It's a great call out though on who we hear the change messages from. So
yeah, and that's especially important when and I don't want to gloss over how important that is when we're dealing with change with a customer, right? You are fooling yourself if you think you are going to come in and drive the end users to change, right? It's you need to support the executive stakeholder and those influencers that you've identified. I never went in and tried to drive adoption using change management techniques directly to the end users. That was something that I armed the leaders and these influencers with in order for them to do it. Because who am I? I'm not just another vendor, right?
But you could be their very best chief of staff when it comes to this change. And I think I love what you called out. And it's, when you get comfortable stepping back and helping somebody else become the face of the change, especially inside of a client organization, it's invaluable. And I don't care what level they are in the hierarchy. That can be ghostwriting emails. It can be giving them talking points. No world-renowned decision maker is doing it all on their own. They all have this team behind them that helps them make it.
Exactly.
And we're going to talk, and next month we're going to talk about something that I think is very important is actually creating a framework that you as a customer success team can apply and customize for the different customers that you have. But at least you come armed with, something beyond feature. How do you talk about push button training? Right? I forget what phrase you used, Toby, but just that feature function. This is what the green button does, right? It's not just about teaching them how to fish. It's teaching them how to fish and where to fish and why they should care about fishing and what's fishing in for them, right? And all those things.
Yeah. That's what cultivates the resilience, I think. It's one thing to get through a single change. Yeah. And Patrick was noting, this could be a single change that's been going on for a year. I can't imagine anything more painful than grinding it out for a year with no results while I'm maintaining all my normal activities.
Yeah.
Let me make a point here. And so back to that story is the importance of change management to partner with project management. Because so often this is what we've got to do. We've got to move. And it was just like, okay, we need a new plan. We need to do X, Y, and Z. And it's just like, wait a second, let's step back. It's really the resistance is coming from the people. It's not the technology. It's not because we don't have a project plan. It's that, wow, we've got to really reshape the thinking and the culture and the attitude.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
That's what was preventing the project from going forward.
There's nothing more painful than a perfectly executed technological implementation that nobody cares about.
That nobody wants. Nobody cares about, that nobody wants to use. Right.
One thing I tell project managers to do is, just organizations as a whole. Let's say you're implementing a very large project, whatever it may be. It doesn't have to be implementing new technology. What is the percentage of change management in the way of dollars relative to the overall cost of the project? Usually that's where people kind of fall out of their seat.
Yeah.
Because it is usually like 2, 3, maybe 5%.
Yeah.
Cool.
And rarely is that allocated.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's an afterthought. Wonderful. Russell, thank you again for the question. Patrick, if you could click that button so it gets removed. It moves over the answer column. Say answer live, and it should say this. Excellent. Thank you. All right. Nomi, apologies if I butchered your name. Nomi asks, I think and Emmanuel has volunteered to jump in on this. I think understanding our customer journey as we onboard a customer is very vital to understand where there may be opportunities? What is the best way to share with departments in a company to get the buy-in to have departments create an in-depth customer journey? Some may not see the benefits, especially if the company just launched a CSM department. Any tips would be appreciated. Sounds like Naomi is probably struggling with that right now herself.
Yeah, thanks, Naomi, for that. First of all, I want to deconstruct that, right? Whenever I look at customer success, I never look at it from just the customer side and that's it, right? For me, it's a whole perspective. It's both what we can do internally, but also for the customer, right? It has to be all encompassing, because the journey is not only a journey that is by the customer by itself, right? It includes interactions with multiple parties from within the organization, right? So usually, and this is something that I tend to push forward, is we need to, whenever we are dealing with the customer journey, right, and especially when you're onboarding, I think it's important to make sure that we first understand, why the customer came in. Let's put the opportunities aside, because once you start looking at the onboarding process or the customer's journey as a way of trying to find opportunity, I think somewhere we've lost that focus on being customer centric, right? Because I think we need to first shift our mindset in making sure that the customer journey is as best as possible for the customer. The opportunities will come, of course, and they will come. But if our sole focus is around making a journey so that we can, fall into opportunities, for me, I tend to go with it from the other way, right? I want to focus on the customer. I want to focus on why is it that they chose it? What is it that they want to achieve in terms of desired business outcome? How do I take them there? And then if along the way there's an opportunity, that's fine. we're gonna take those opportunities and work on them. Now, to answer your second point around, looking at other departments to see how, they can come up with their own journeys and so on. I think it's important when you are dealing with internal departments, we are all serving one common purpose, right? Which is basically to service the customer. Yes, you can have a development team in the back end that is sitting, that never sees the customer. But the reason why they are there is to serve, the customer and to enable them to do their business, right? And often when I look at internally, how can I speak to leaders to ensure that the journey of the customer, in fact, I'm going through that process right now, it's really to say to the guys, let's put ourselves in the shoes of our customers, right? If you were a customer, and then really bring it to them, right? And this is a conversation that you need to have with the leader of that particular department or whatever, before you can even start creating a huge journey mapping exercise within the organization. Within each of those touch points, right, do those leaders truly believe that the journey that they have or the one they envisage is the best that it could be in terms of servicing the customer, right? And you'll find that how you position that, most often you'll find that there will be an acknowledgement that things could be done better. And that's the approach that I've taken, and it has helped me in especially having difficult conversations with, for example, when you look at talking about, support organization, how we can change our ways to make them better, and even, other areas like finance, how we build customer, right? All those touch points, when you look at them to make that journey for the customer as smooth as possible, do you or the leaders of those departments believe that they have created a journey that is creating a touch point that could be the best that it can be? And I would say, to answer your question, you need to focus on that. try and see it from that angle, and of course all the other stuff like opportunities will come along. One of the books that I've read that has kind of changed my view in terms of, or at least added to my view, and that is a book called What Customer Crave, written by Nicholas Webb, is one that talks a lot about the touch points and improving the journey. So Naomi, if you haven't read that book, I would recommend that you read that. It will give you some insights and ways of tackling this issue. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, I think that you one thing that really jumped out at me, what you said, I mean, it was all great, but the you need to help your peers in other organizations understand the customer's perspective. Mm-hmm. We in customer success, typically you find people in customer success have high EQ, that you're empathetic, right? You have to have empathy in order to do this job. Right. Mm-hmm. But you can't assume that folks in other teams that are not customer facing have that same level of empathy, and you can't just say something. You have to lead them to that. And so you have to make the first move. Yes. Right. You have to be the one that brings that to them.
I love that EQ. I think of that EQ as a superpower. And what's really interesting is as we think about all these different organizations, the most effective change leaders I've worked with and have seen are amazing translators. They care enough about the people they work with to understand what language resonates. And there's been a bunch of work around love languages, so how you fold the clothes might be how you tell your spouse that you love them. That's how it works in my house.
Oh, that pile of clothes on my bed's not a good sign then.
How you throw it in the washing basket, right?
Right. So, but it is also like using the language of the people we work with to let them know that they're being heard. And I think that whoever translates most effectively, I got a partner, we're talking a lot about the language we use and how important it is for these teams. We assume customer journey means something all the way back to the developers and the guy that's optimizing the servers, right? That may not mean a lot to them, but if we can help connect their language to our vision of journey, then they're going to be all in.
We need to connect the dots. We need to connect the dots for them. We're getting close on time. I appreciate the folks who stayed past to 15 minutes past the hour. Like we said, we've got a lot. We usually have a lot of Q&A. And there's some great questions. So B asks, dependent on your product, you might be highly dependent on your client, project sponsors, heavy support and managing change. If you lack this support for various reasons, what's your best advice? And Patrick, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I'll
that's a
just
tough,
because time's short. I'm going to kind of jump to the Cliff Notes version, because I have like a whole probably a questionnaire of about 50 questions that I go through and in assessing any project sponsor. But really I look at it is that person, is he or she able to remove roadblocks for the team and create and show the vision for the change, whatever that change may be. Maybe it's implementing a new process, a new product, a new service, whatever that may be. Are they able to remove the roadblocks, which, by the way, is something that is for each person that's a manager or a leader, that is one of your primary roles, is to remove obstacles for those people that you serve as a manager or leader. And so that's where I kind of get to, kind of the root of it. And the next thing is, if they don't have that, do they have the desire to do that? And if not, then that's a conversation that I'm having with who was the buyer.
That's a huge red flag. That's a big risk. That's a big risk right there. Yeah.
It is probably, I would say, one of the first things I look at on any change is what is the project sponsor's role, influence, and ability to communicate within the organization? And that's looking at externally, internally, kind of the same thing.
And if that person lacks the power or the desire, there is nothing that there's nothing you can do. You're stuck. Yeah. It's a huge red flag. And that's something that you need to assess early, and you need to raise that early.
Yeah. Right. I mean, the closest thing you can, if you're kind of stuck in a corner, you can't work your way out, you can't get a new sponsor or whatever, is what Toby was saying. You could become the best chief of staff.
Yeah. Cool. Excellent. Thanks, Patrick. And then I think we got time for one more. Just quick. Let's do some quick tips. What are your tips in empowering your clients to be the front of change management in the organization? So kind of dovetails into that question. Just a tip or two. Let's start with Toby. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah. The simple one, it would be coach that client to listen more, right? If it's only their agenda, nobody cares. When people see that their fingerprints are on it, it looks different. And so when presenting that change, invite the input.
Yeah. Excellent. Make it a group. It's a group thing. Patrick, you got anything?
No. I was actually kind of looking at the next question about the problem customer success has with change management.
Yeah.
And I was going to actually kind of go a little bit broader than just customer success. And one of the things that I see in most organizations when they look at change management is that, I'll tell you what change management is not. Change management is not an HR thing, where people are like, oh, that's change management, or you know what, that's the communication that my boss sends out, that's change management. Or even worse, change management, that is this, and this is, I hear this, change management, that's the softer side of project management. That's the touchy-feely side. That's when we talk about feelings. That is not change management. And I would just say, look, change management is so much broader. And, Success Hacker has a great class Toby leads. I'm like, look at the outline just out on the website. You can kind of look at it and go, wow, that's a very, very comprehensive set of skills and knowledge that change managers bring to the table. So it's not just a customer success.
It's a lot of content. You get to spend 3 half days with Toby. So that's a commitment.
and I think it's important as well to make sure that people understand that, right? Like you said, people belittle the importance of change management, right? By the statistics that you just shared, you shared earlier on, Toby. It's important that people understand this is actually a crucial part of every change that needs to take place, and that people need to invest time in it, and not only time but the effort in making sure that it happens. All that, if you don't have an individual or group of individuals that actually are focusing day in, day out in making sure that actually happens, it's difficult, right? And it's the reason why a lot of projects, transformational change, fail in many organizations, is because there hasn't been that focus to say let's make sure that people understand, let's take them through this journey, let's reinforce, let's continue that process over and over again. And it's not for everybody. That's the truth, right? Change is not as change management as a function is not for everybody. You need to be driven by wanting to do this kind of work, right? To be able to see change, to be able to nurture it, to be able to take it from A to Z, right? It's also very much dependent on the individual, and hence why I mentioned in the beginning, change starts with the person actually delivering it and doing the change as well. Right?
Yeah, for sure. That's great. Well, thank you, B, Jessica, and Lauren for those questions. We are at the end of this webcast. I think it was a great conversation, but it's not what I think. It's what all of you think that joined us. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself or Success Coaching or any of my guests. who I want to thank you. I want to thank you guys for an amazing panel, for spending the time with us today, as well as our prep call last week. I came out of that prep call really excited about today, because you all have some great experience to share and some great perspectives and best practices. And we all very, very much appreciate making time in your schedule to provide these insights and best practices that you share. One final note, great CSMs know they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. And that's why we created CSM Mastermind in our other webinar series, to harness the knowledge and the experience of the community to help improve everyone. So once again, we hope you got something out of this discussion, and we'll see you at our next event. We have the CS Leadership Roundtable on the 17th, and our next CSM Mastermind is on March 24th, when we're going to discuss managing time effectively as a CSM. Check out successcoaching.co to find out more and sign up. Until we see you again, have a great rest of your day, week, and month. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.